Yeah, cool. Brilliant.
Okay, this is what it's all about, and this is how simple it all is. Okay, you know this stuff already. Each of you already knows these truths. First one, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Who's heard that? Yeah, we all heard it. What does that mean in truth? In truth, what it means is natural law will prevail. Okay? And that means natural law, or the truth, is sovereign. I'm trying to move people away from this concept that we, each individuals, are sovereign. Because that makes us and isolates us. We are whole. Humanity cannot survive where we each are individual. We are social animals. So, ignorance of the law is no excuse. And so, I'll just give you the example, because Boris Johnson, I don't know if you guys have heard of the new bill they're pushing through, that on 1st of April next year, everybody's going to jump off the cliffs of Dover. Okay, so we'll use that as a way of example. Okay, because to test the truth, we must test the extreme. So, ignorance of the law is no excuse. In that context is, when I step over the edge of the cliff, if I know the law, or if I don't know the law, it's still going to run. Okay? So ignorance of the law is no excuse. To lie is to go against the mind. What distinguishes us from survival instinct, reptilian brain, okay, is the power of logic and reason. Once we take control of our brain, what allegedly distinguishes us from animals is the power of logic and reason. I don't believe that, that's what the scientists tell me. So what that means is, logic and reason is how we create consent. We create a mutual understanding, a meeting of the minds, and that there is foundational for consent. Because without consent or a meeting of the minds, and what people need to understand, and I'll start now, when you have a meeting of the minds, that is what the consent is for, not what happens afterwards. Okay? So even if you want to claim that we voted for these MPs, or some people did, firstly, they didn't have any COVID-19 on it. But the point is, when things change, there is no longer a meeting of the minds. So, a meeting of the minds, to lie is to go against the mind. So fundamentally, anything where you're lying to gain an advantage, that is wrong. All are equal under the law. What that simply means is, there is no such thing as privileges. What one can do, we all can do. No one is above the law. There's no such thing as immunity. We are all accountable for harm that we cause. The law operates without fear or favour. Basically, the due process of law will follow its normal course of action, and will be innocent until proven guilty. So basically, it doesn't matter what you believe. Okay, when you step over that cliff, right? The due process of law, we know gravity will take over, whether you know about it or not. You'll be fine until you go splat at the bottom. Okay. So in essence, that's all that you need to know. But the question is, how can I stand on that when I've got a big bully in my face? Yeah? So when you've got a big bully in your face, be it a policeman, from the council, somebody wanting to shut your business down, take your livelihood away, any of these things, this shows how simple it is. And if you can stand on this and present it along. So a policeman comes up. Okay, yeah, I'm going to give you a ticket. Oh, can I give that person a ticket? No. Oh, thank you for confirming. This is not all. Literally, that's how simple this stuff done.
Will you say that once more, please? Just go to that sequence again. Policeman says, go.
A policeman comes up to you and says, right, parking ticket for you, or speeding ticket for you. You simply ask, can I do that? If the answer is no, it cannot be law. It's a privilege. Therefore, nothing to do with law. So this is fundamentally where everything is leading to give you standing, okay, Now, people talk about words, and you'll see words are actually not important. It's a substance. Substance is important. Am I getting the message across that I'm trying to get across? It doesn't matter which words I use. Am I getting my message across? Because that's important. Substance. Yeah.
So can I ask, if you say that's law, and you say they can't do it, if you're, say, doing 40 and a 30, and you've gone against that law...
40 and 30,
You know what I mean?
the point is,
That's
if I'm the policeman saying you've done 40 instead of 30, okay, your question to me would become, can I do the same as you and find the next person? Okay?
And if you can't, it's privilege.
Correct. And if you can't do the same thing that somebody's asking you to do, okay, because we're all equal under the law. So if one can do it, we all can do it.
If I can't do it, he shouldn't do it.
Correct. It's telling you it is not law. All right? So this is sort of the absolute simplicity of what it all boils down to. So basically, everything is about we're all equal under the law, nobody's above the law. Why do we get together in society? What's the real advantage of, what do we all like?
Yeah.
Unity.
Safety.
Unity.
Safety.
Safety.
Connection.
Connection.
Support each other.
Support. And what does that give us?
Society.
Peace. Okay? So everything is about literally living together in peace, peaceful coexistence. That's where everything stems from in law. The reason we are living together is to manage the destructive nature of human beings. Okay? And we create a system whereby we contain the destructive nature of humans because it's enough hassle to try and coexist with the rest of nature, with what's going on there. So everything in law stems from a breach of peace, and it's a breach of your mind's peace. Your mind controls your body. You have absolute right, and it's absolutely covered in law, whichever way you look at it. You have the absolute right of what happens with your body. Okay? Nobody can tell you what to put in it. This is well covered in law. You choose what you want to put in it. Nobody can stop it, even if they think it's a bad idea. Even if 99% of them think it's a bad idea, it's your body. Nobody can tell you what to put in there except you. And hence consent, again, thousands of years old. This is nothing new. So what goes into your body is up to you. You own, or when I say own, you have the highest right to your children. Why? Because you are the closest person to the act of creation of the children. So the mother really is the one that knows who the father is. Okay, therefore the mother is really she's got a higher right to children than the father. The tough shit fathers, okay? That's the way it is. But it's rational, okay? Come in. This whole question of what's going on now about, testing, all of this stuff in schools. Again, this is settled hundreds of years ago. Basically, anybody that's got an issue with children, just tell the teachers to go and read up the Tenors Abolition Act 1760, because we bloody well sorted this out 300 years ago, in writing, in Parliament. Okay, it's done.
What was that act again?
It's all in there. We'll go back to it later. Okay? But this is what I'm saying, okay? All of this stuff is referenced. So basically, already there you've got one example. 1760, we've sorted this battle about who owns kids. At the time it was slightly different because at the time the father we still had men as the god in the house. For some reason, I don't know why. Logic and reason doesn't support that. But it was settled 300 years ago. And we're arguing about the same crap, and this is what's so frustrating. The peace was settled in 1360. we are all entitled to peace. 700 years ago. I'm still messing around with this nonsense. So most of this comes from ancient times. And you'll see how we come back to this when we talk about the Bill of Rights. So basically, a breach of the peace is, the test is very simple. Either somebody has caused harm, and I don't like the second aspect of it, but basically, you want to sit down here? So the first aspect of a breach of peace is either somebody's caused harm or intends to cause harm. I have a real problem with intends to cause harm, and the reason is really, really simple. Okay, you now playing into thought crimes and that sort of nonsense, and that's utter nonsense. We all have the right to fantasize, read, whatever you want, okay? But it's not necessarily causing harm, and that there is part of your freedom of speech in order to be able to try and express and formulate your thoughts. Okay, it doesn't mean that you have to create the reality of harm. But once you do knowingly cause harm, then absolutely you need to be liable for the harm that you cause. So we all have the right to go about our lives without question to explore this reality according to our conscience, so long as we don't knowingly cause another person harm. So why the hell are we fighting and struggling like we are? It's just insane when you look at the truth. So I just want to quickly talk about now equity really, and start to concentrate on equity, because equity is really, really simple. So fundamentally there's two types of law. Natural law, now we can call this God's law, universal law, common law, people call it by many, many names. But when I use the word natural law, I'm talking about the force greater than ourselves. Okay, the creator, whatever you want to call it, it matters not. Okay, and that's also for clarity, because that distinguishes between law that we create, okay, which is basically through contract we agree, and when we agree and consent, that then binds us. Okay? So once we've bound ourselves or agreed to bind ourselves to an obligation or a right or a duty, then that has the force of law. So that means that either the community can enforce it or the parties can enforce it. So do you see what I'm saying here? Now, we all can enter our own agreements. We all have entered agreements. We all have many agreements, written and unwritten. When we do that, okay, that then, if a dispute arises from that, we need a dispute resolution mechanism. So basically, everything starts off as private law. I can have a contract. Yeah. In fact, believe it or not, I've got a contract with all of you here now today. You've all got a contract with me. Unspoken. I mean, unwritten. Okay. If any of us don't like the interactions, okay, based upon the expectations, because we've not expressed much in writing. So, but the expectation is, if I don't deliver and tell you what you want to hear, or then you don't get out of it, doors there, you just leave. Okay. So everything starts as private contract, and when we can't resolve dispute in private, we need to go to the public for public dispute resolution. So one way of looking at this, okay, we have a law in common created by our private contract, so I've got lots of law in common. But for today, we've got a lot of that individual law in common is also law in common in the group. So common law is something that people tend to have different ideas about what common law is in their head. So just give me three people. Shout out. what do you understand by common law?
Case law.
Case law, that's called common law precedents, yeah? Next.
Common sense.
Common sense, okay? Now, common sense, we'll talk about it. Actually, let's just talk about it. Common sense, all right, is dependent upon social conditioning. Right? I spent a lot of time in Kuwait, and the American military were around there. And I can assure you, American common sense, okay, is very different from British common sense. Okay, and it makes sense. Okay? So, in Kuwait you get a lot of third world maids and labour coming from the third world. And when I say from the third world, literally they're out from huts, okay? And they come into a modern house. So there's incidences of them electrocuting themselves. Why? They take a bucket of water and they start washing all the electrics and stuff like that. So what to you or me might be common sense, okay, is not necessarily common sense. So, you know, just be wary with common sense. Anything else?
Do no harm.
Natural law, some people would call it, yeah.
Do no harm.
Do no harm, yes. Okay. So, in principle, we've got this distinction of two types of usage of the word common law. One is common law precedents, which is case law.
Sorry, can you explain what common law precedent?
I'll do that now, yeah. And the other one is this association with natural law type of thing. Okay? So, common law precedence is, now, we have private contract, and we cannot settle it in private, the matter. When we go to, not going to pick a new way. Hi, thanks for making time getting there.
Sorry, I had it in my calendar for
No.
10 o'clock.
Honestly, thank you. It's great. You made the effort. No, nothing to apologize. So, when we cannot resolve disputes in private, we need public dispute resolution. That public dispute resolution is what creates a binding precedent. But the difference between the British common law system and the Roman civil law system, or whatever people want to call that, is quite simply, in the common law countries, the lower courts are bound to follow previous decisions made by higher courts where the facts or principles of law apply. So what that means is I can take any higher judgment into a lower court and they must rule in the same manner because the matter's been settled previously by a higher court. It's much better than the Roman civil law system because the civil law system, basically the judge is not bound to follow existing precedents. So depending on what interactions they have with their clients or the people or what side of bed they get out of, the Roman law is much less predictable, whereas the common law in theory is very, very predictable. So it's a much better system with common law precedents. So what happens is we create a private contract, we get into dispute. When we dispute it, why is that? It's because we've not expressed clearly and communicated and set true expectations. We've got a different picture of expectations here than what we've got written here. That ends up at a point of dispute. So how do we resolve that dispute? In the first instance, we use our conscience. Okay? You lied to us, you didn't tell us the truth, or you tried to manipulate, or somewhere down here there's some small print. Okay? All of this is based on conscience, what we feel is right and wrong. So what we do is, even though we don't know the words, or aren't using the words, we are using equity, right and wrong, what is fair and just, always to make a determination as to how we settle disputes, and that's as simple as the dispute settlement. And guess what? Okay, in this country, it tells you in the Senior Courts Act 1981, Section 49, equity is supreme. in the event of a conflict with the common law, equity prevails. So what we naturally do anyway is affirmed in legislation to be the highest enforceable law in the land. So I'm trying to get people to use the word equity. And the reason for that is it's an expression that they already know in the existing system. Okay? I'm not trying to argue something they don't know. Well, they're actually pretty ignorant about it. But the point is, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. In the system it already says equity will prevail in the event of a conflict with a common law. And that's a common law precedence, an existing judgment. When existing judgment is not fair and just, we argue lawful excuse from that under the rules of equity, which prevail. Okay? The problem is, barristers and solicitors have no idea how the system works. Okay?
Could you read that, please? We argue the law.
We argue lawful excuse
Not excuse.
from an existing binding common law precedence. Okay? So we're excusing ourselves from the law because our feelings tell us the law is wrong. Okay? And that there then creates a new, higher truth. So in theory, we've got a beautiful system which just spirals up and up into the search of truth and simplicity. And you'll find most of that in Supreme Court judgments. Okay? But we'll talk about that a little later. So, a breach of the peace...
Can I just ask,
Please?
when you say that, barristers and lawyers don't know this stuff,
First-hand experience?
is it that they're not taught?
Right, we'll diverge here a bit, because that's a brilliant question.
What was the question? They're not taught it.
Are they not taught it? Right, okay, 80-20 rule. Okay, we'll just use it because it's pretty much the same. Okay, 80-20 rule is your pyramid as well. Okay, so you've got your pyramid here. So this applies everywhere in life. What you've got is on the base level, okay, anybody can go to law school. Yeah? So on the base level, it doesn't matter about race, colour, sex, orientation, anything. We've got, everybody goes into, is it LLB or whatever, I don't know. But basically, that there we taught about this stuff called legislation. We'll be talking about legislation, okay? Fundamentally, legislation is the written form of verbal expression. Okay, so to me, legal is the written form, lawful is the actual expression. So these people here don't all get good jobs. And the rich kids, okay, the rich kids get further education. So down here, they're primarily taught legislation and, oh yeah, we did a lecture on common law. Oh yeah, I remember somebody came in one evening and did a lecture on equity. The rich kids get further education and these become barristers. And whereas in the magistrates' courts, so this is the magistrates' courts where solicitors can be heard. 95% of cases are settled in the magistrates' courts. Okay? Where the solicitors are the representatives who can't get decent jobs in the top firms. Okay? I'm not kidding you. That's what it is. So, and then the barristers not only get further education, they go to the right lodges or temples. Okay, and then the really good ones, okay, become QCs or KCs, Queen's Counsel.
Temples?
Temples. You know, like the
Temple Bar.
The Bar Association, the Barrister Association Registry or something like that they call themselves. It's a private club, it's a monopoly to keep the business to themselves. Okay? And they've got around the country different temples.
You're doing Masons, yeah?
It's all the same sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
You know, it's all the same thing. It's
Affiliation.
just affiliation, whichever way you want to call it, church. It's just temples. Temples traditionally, when you go back the word, it actually meant a place of business. So a temple's merely a place of business. So that's where we do business.
So when you said 95% of cases are settled in magistrates court,
Yeah.
Is it true that magistrates court can only sentence you up to 2 years in prison, and that's that they've only got
It
those certain
depends,
powers?
but they've got limited powers. You have
Yeah,
to
it's 2 years in
know.
prison, I thought. Is it 6
months.
Is it
It's
6 months?
6
It's
months.
only a year in prison.
But we won't worry about details like that at the minute.
Anything more than that goes, well, that's one.
Yeah, we won't worry about details like that at the minute, but yes, there's a restriction.
I'll just give a
and
correlation
money.
to why 95% would be settled.
No, because it's basically a fucking scam, excuse my French. Really, it's a scam. Okay? And
It's a
so,
financial scam, getting fined and things.
no, it's basically it's a method of stealing from the poor and redistributing to the rich.
But
That's what it's
financial,
all
it's
about.
financial stuff.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, fundamentally financial.
Thank you.
Always supported with the threat of violence or actual violence. Now, the rich kids who come from the right families and actually work hard get selected to become QCs, Queen's Counsels, or if there's a King's Counsel. So we've got the Magistrates Court, then we've got the High Court. So the High Court, then we've got the Appeal Court, and then we've got the Supreme Court. So the structure is everybody gets in at this level, legislation is law. Oh yeah, I heard about common law, and oh yes, I've heard this word equity. It's how much money I've got in my house, isn't it? Then, and that's restricted, that's largely Magistrates Court and Crown Court. County Court and High Court is legislation, and they vaguely heard about common law. The Appeal Court, they are common law and vaguely heard about equity. And Supreme Court is fundamentally equity. So basically, to get from the bottom to the top, you're probably looking in excess of £1 million. So that's why the rich have access to fair and just, but we don't. Right? But we're getting through this by sharing knowledge. So so that there really is to emphasize why people feel that it's corrupt. Most people would call this corrupt. To me, this is human nature. Okay? Nothing corrupt about it. We do as little as possible for as much as possible, and as a result of that, it's a bullying. Again, if we change our perception, we can empower ourselves. So instead of calling them a corrupt bunch of buggers and all of this, accept we've got a part to play. Our part is the most important part. If we do not accept responsibility for our actions, okay, we can only blame ourselves. We need to share knowledge, and that is the way we empower ourselves. We first start getting knowledge, that gives us confidence, and once we see other people implementing that knowledge, because knowledge is not power until it's used. That's when it becomes powerful. So, with this here, I think you can see now the fundamental cause of what some people believe really are corruption problems, but we have tools to empower ourselves with it. And I'm working in both the civil and the criminal courts with people like you and me. Okay, I'm not a lawyer, I've learned this myself. And we're working together and we're sharing knowledge. And 2 weeks ago, we actually managed to get a criminal procedure rule changed. Despite what all the legal professionals were telling us. They were telling us it's impossible, you can't do that. So we hold serious power.
What did you get changed?
Criminal procedure rules. Okay, I don't know, I think some of you know, is Craig here? No? Okay.
Who's that?
Craig.
Great.
Yeah, he's one of Calvin's mates. I think some young people know Calvin and Keeley. Basically, I've been working with Calvin. Keeley's up in Scotland somewhere. I did start actually working with her, but she's a bit more hot-headed than Calvin is. But with Calvin, what we've got is, he got convicted. Right, let's just quickly try and put this into context. In the magistrate's court, okay, prior to going to the magistrate's court, Keeley's phone, which has got the evidence on it, was taken, and another policeman filmed that evidence and put that evidence in court, but not the phone. The phone has got an hour and a half video, and they've selectively put in like 10 minutes to suit their case. It's pretty damn obvious what they've done. And so we put in applications to get the evidence. We want the phone. And because we weren't familiar at the time of all the procedures, basically Calvin got hold of me the day before, we ended up firefighting in the court, asking for that phone to be put into evidence so that they can say, here, look, those guys, the security guards, threw the first punch. They did everything to try and avoid that. And as a result of that, we've basically got an abuse of process application in against 3 policemen and 2 court officials. But that's just because we're becoming familiar now with the court rules. What we're trying to do is, what is the point of putting ourselves in a position where they have the advantage, i.e. in the theatre of the courtroom, where they're trained to mess you around with words. So what we're doing is starting to get proactive and say, hang on, send your questions to my house on paper, and we'll try and get all of this stuff sorted on paper, okay? And that there allows us then to not be stressed and us actually, again, taking control. And we're learning ways now of how to actually stop this process going through and actually learning to hold magistrates to account. So what we did was, we'll be finishing off today on the notices, okay? We actually, for 4 weeks, were nice to them, and then we put them on notice. We put them on notice Monday morning, Wednesday morning, and Friday morning, giving them till Friday, 5 o'clock Friday, to process his appeal, because when the judges would not enter the phone into evidence, Calvin says, this is a fucking joke, kangaroo court, walked out. Quite rightly. Well, okay, I mean, he's still in hide. But, no, because of the principle is right. Okay? Criminal is beyond reasonable doubt. I mean, for a policeman to apply their mind to go and film part of the thing and put that into court and not just take the phone and put that into court, I mean, Jesus Christ, that really raises reasonable doubt, just that shit. So, at 4:45 on Friday, they replied to our notice, saying, no, we still believe we're right. On Monday morning, we put in an application in section 111, which Emily's done as well, okay? And that day, by 5 o'clock on Monday evening, they processed the appeal after 5 weeks of telling us this cannot be done. So through learning it, we are starting to hold the courts to account, and that there is starting to change behaviour. So we actually really hold a lot of power. And that's simply, by using binding precedences. We're using in the magistrates' court, Supreme Court precedences. Supreme Court judgments are very good. Okay, so what we're doing is saying to you, look, you're not arguing with me about whether this is right or wrong. Go and argue with the Supreme Court, my friend. Okay? So we're removing ourselves from the fight by just, here you go. You want to rule against the Supreme Court, please